All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Creating Housing session. I am Megan Woolard. I'm the Johnson County reporter for the Gazette, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to kind of give a brief introduction about who you are and how your work relates to creating housing.
Yeah, so I can go first on this. My name is Matt Daniels. I'm the Director of Operations for Origin Homes. Origin Homes is a build-on-your-lot custom home builder, proudly serving the rural markets in all 99 counties. And we have a secondary focus that is our rural housing initiative. And we're bringing more affordable, speculative line homes to rural communities all across the state.
My name is Glenn Lyons. I'm a planning consultant. I just moved back to Canada in July, but I had been involved in building housing in rural Iowa for the last 10 years, places like Knoxville, Fairfield, and the like.
I'm Dean Andrews. I'm the mayor of Charles City, Iowa. We've had a couple of successes in housing developments coming to our community. We kind of really started to focus on trying to find more and diverse housing in our community a couple of years ago. And so through some of the tax credit programs, we've had some successes that we'll talk about today.
Perfect. Well, that's a great segue. Would each of you mind talking a little bit about some of the successes related to housing projects in each of your fields?
Yeah, I can go there. We were designated as a thriving community a couple of years ago on the first round of thriving communities. And so we applied for that and were accepted. And so because of that, when we developers who are looking to do low-income housing tax credits or workforce housing tax credits, they get extra points on their application because if they are proposing a project in our community, because we are a thriving community. Obviously, we have, being a rural community in northern Iowa, we don't have the developers in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City area or the Des Moines, Ames area that are doing a lot of developing. And so it's harder for developers to come to our community. And so because we get these extra points on tax credit applications, we've had a couple of different groups that have come to our town. One that's building currently is the Collective on 13th. That's with the Commonwealth developers out of Wisconsin, and that's a low-income housing or affordable housing, 48-unit apartment complex, two buildings, one 16 units, one 24 units. And then we just this fall were awarded Kading Properties out of Urbandale was awarded a workforce housing tax credits for our project. So they're going to come in probably start next spring or summer doing 74 units of duplexes, fourplexes, and sixplexes. Those will be rentals, but they're more in the workforce housing market rate tax housing project. We in Charles City need all different levels of housing. So this is addressing affordable housing and workforce housing, two of the areas that we're looking to build upon. So that's kind of our two projects that are going right now.
Glenn, I can go next. My favorite project is our cottage style pocket neighborhood in Grinnell, but the most significant one is the Veterans District Phase 1 in Knoxville. That first phase is finished in terms of land development. We've got 48 units seniors project, 36 unit apartment rental project under construction. And we sold 34 lots. And by the end of next year, all 34 lots should be developed. Knoxville's now working on the second phase, which I set up, and we're beginning to do an extension to kick that off. But it could be another 80 units of single family housing.
Yeah, so Matt Daniels again here with Origin. Our business line, we're one of many arms of the Hubble Realty name, and with the Rural Housing Initiative, we saw the need for custom homes outside the metro. And when that came to fruition in 2023, we decided to apply for some workforce housing tax credits in 3 communities. So This is 15 homes in total across 3 communities. Our first stab at it was Knoxville, Gowrie, and Manning, five homes in each community. Had some great success early on down in Knoxville, but have sold homes in each, Gowrie and Manning. So seeing some good traction there. We decided to go ahead and apply again in 2024 with 13 homes. This was in Knoxville again, Conrad, and Jefferson. So the common theme for us is we're seeing communities right around 1,000 to 2,000, and then the bigger markets with Knoxville, with near Pella there. We went ahead and applied again this year in 2025 for 10 more homes over in Panora and Knoxville. So over the course of 3 years, we've been able to bring 28 rooftops, and soon to be 38, and had a lot of success. But I think something that sets us apart is just working in conjunction with the community, with the economic development teams, working with city council members, and then local employers. And so there's not a one size fits all for each community. It's different pieces, for each application. But we're seeing the need, and it's fun to see the growth, and seeing those rooftops go in, and then having the ability to offer the customization on our spec homes. But then also, if somebody sees our product, meets our team, and wants to build a custom home on their land, or even one of these housing developments. So I think it's an encouraging thing that other builders and developers are starting to see and be a part of, and that's offering variety. And I think every rural community really does need that. So.
Yeah, when it comes to kind of community partnerships, what does it look like to fit the housing needs of a community?
It's Glenn. I think the key, whether it's a land developer or a builder or the municipality, sometimes the nonprofit ECDEV Corp that you're working with, they really need to understand the marketplace and its supply and demand, the different niches for housing, affordability, all those things, the availability of service land or not. And when they work through that puzzle, they really have to get rid of some misconceptions. We all need housing, we think. We all know what kind of housing we like, but what housing will fit the marketplace at this time, and is profitable, and what housing could be acquired with incentives. That's a puzzle that is different for each community to solve.
Yeah, and I would just kind of echo that with Glenn, and say that the affordability is key, but affordability means different things to different people. And depending on your community, depending on that marketplace, a workforce housing tax credit does not mean that the quality of the home or the craftsmanship or the size is going to set a standard in any way. So we pride ourselves on keeping our quality high and trying to hit a price point that makes sense for the community, which we've done a ton of research on, obviously, before we enter a market, and vet that community. And we want to make sure that we're bringing a product that is going to make sense. We don't want it to sit in a community any longer than the economic team and the city. If the house is for sale for more than 12 months, it starts to become a question. And why are we doing this? And so for me, it's just making sure we're educating everybody on the process and why we're doing it, and keeping it affordable.
So in our community, we have a need for all levels of housing, whether it's the lower income housing, the middle income housing, the high income housing. Like I said, one of our projects that's coming in is for affordable housing or the low income housing tax credits. And so one of the things that we tried to educate our citizens on is that, as soon as people hear low income housing, it's like, oh, we don't want those people in our community. We have enough of those people. And so, we tried to push it that, those people are people that are living in our community. These are people that maybe don't have they have an income. They just don't have a high enough income to afford an upper level home. But they're the grocery clerks are at our stores. They're the nurses' aides at the nursing home. They're the people that work at the hospital that are, some of the tech jobs there. And so these are people that are already living in our community, but we're trying to provide them a higher quality level of living than what maybe they can afford without some of the help that the affordable living gives them. So I think that was a big plus in our community, was what we kind of tried to explain to people. For the low income housing, this is people that you interact with every day.
Well, Panos, we all spoke earlier this week, and we kind of talked about a gap in middle class housing. What does that mean, and how can we work to address it?
I'll, I'll,
Go
I'll
ahead.
go, simply there's low-income affordable housing is subsidized. Traditionally, the federal government has played a big role in that. High-income housing finances itself, and a lot of our building community, particularly in rural areas, has gravitated to that. It's the easiest piece of business going. The middle is difficult. Costs and in borrowing costs and construction materials in particular gotten so high that it's hard to mortgage a starter home, a middle-class home, on the incomes that you see in the rural areas and in some of the urban communities as well.
Yeah, and some of the reoccurring narratives, I guess, that we see with this is your low to no inventory, your trades are busy, your housing market's falling, your declining population, but businesses are trying to grow. And in order for these businesses to grow, people want to live where they're working. And if we don't have those opportunities for rooftops, you're simply that declining population is going to continue. And so to Mayor Dean Andrews' point is we have to have a way to fit all the needs of all the different housing models. I feel like my team and I have done a good job when it comes to working on incentives to help fill that gap. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later in this discussion. But part of filling that gap is having those public-private partnerships and working at different levels, across the community and with the employers, and really getting the buy-in from everybody so that everyone's kind of rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, and I mentioned before that our other project is with Kading Properties out of Urbandale, and they're going to start next fall, and they're going to build duplexes, fourplexes, and sixplexes. And one of the reasons they're able to do that in Charles City is because the workforce housing tax credits that they got. But these are all going to be rental properties. We're still missing maybe some of the single family home purchase properties, but Kading has done these rental units all throughout many places around the state, and it's proven to be pretty successful. And so we also hear from some of our employers and just in general, new people to the community a lot of times want to rent to start with. Elderly people want to rent because they don't want to do the yard work and the snow shoveling and those kind of things anymore. So I think for us, these units will be a good market in our community, I think, because it does provide that middle income housing that we are short of.
So then how does that work in terms of kind of communities working with builders to provide a mix of housing types within a community?
Well, I can tell you on the builder side, some of the things that we're looking for when you're talking about entering a market. The first question is always, do you have shovel-ready lots? Does the city own any shovel-ready lots? And you kind of get mixed reviews on that sometimes. Well, there's sewer there, there's water there, but these haven't been platted, they haven't been developed. We're looking for those areas that are platted, developed, ready to go. We could start digging tomorrow, with the permitting and everything in place. So there's a lot of incentives that go into that, anywhere from waiving building permit fees, reduction in pricing of lots. We've seen any creativity from credits and upgrading on sidewalks and concrete, lot subordination. So there's a lot of things that can kind of be packaged together there to entice a builder or developer to come to that area. And then I try to push hard that we want to work as much as we can with local trades. And that's another whole nother conversation. Sometimes trying to partner local where we can. And I feel like some of the demand that we're seeing in our marketplaces is strictly that the local trades and contractors can't fill all the gaps and get there. So any of the incentives that we can provide as ideas, and then cities to bring those ideas to us as well. We're looking for all of those things.
And Glenn, in the case of Knoxville, also Fairfield for that matter, they didn't have the lots, and there weren't land developers that were prepared to take the long-term risk of developing new subdivisions. So in the case of Knoxville, the city and Marion County partnered to do the land development, at least the first phase, which is just finishing. And in Fairfield, it was their nonprofit economic development corporation in the city that partnered to bring on the first phase is about 34 single family lots, and this all told it'll be about 130. So in that case, our municipalities and some of their partners were obliged to move in and be developers, be the land developers, take the risk. In other communities where the lots are available already, the role of the municipality can be very different.
Mm-hmm.
So with our two projects, not only did the city work with the developers, but our area development corporation also worked with the developers. These both these areas are out towards where our industrial park is. That was land owned by either the area development corporation or by the city. And so we actually sold that property to our developers for $1. So they got the lots basically for free. The advantage of the Kading property, they're going to put in all of the infrastructure. They're going to do the sewer, the water, and the streets at their expense rather than our expense, which was a big deal for us. We also give 100% tax abatements on new projects for 10 years. So that, I think that's been a plus. We had a lower scale, but when we went to the housing conference a year ago, we started talking to other communities and saying, well, what do you guys do for tax abatements? And it seemed like the new normal was 100% tax abatements for 10 years if you really want to get a developer to come in. So we have that available in Charles City, and that's been a big plus. I say plus being able to work with giving them the property for a very low cost.
Yeah, let's talk like a little bit more about some of these tax incentives that you've all mentioned. Sort of what specific, state and local incentives are available, and how can that be used to help the build process?
Well, the two obvious ones the mayor mentioned, tax abatement, and that works really well for rental projects. Tax increment financing for new subdivisions works very well also. And Kading, for example, uses it. They're on their second project in Knoxville, and without that, this 250 unit subdivision wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, and the most common one for us is working closely with the IDA and the workforce housing tax credit applications. We're seeing some tax abatements here and there, but that's a big one for us because it just helps mitigate risk a little bit when we're entering these communities. And quite honestly, we're rolling that over to the end user. And so we're able to lower, in a lot of cases, the price point on a home by anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 from what you would normally see. So it is a large piece of the puzzle, and it's a massive incentive for us.
I might add the workforce housing tax credit program works really well. And
yeah, like I say, the two big projects we have, one of them has used the low-income housing tax credits. The other one has used the workforce housing tax credits. So again, without those, they wouldn't probably be possible. But the other thing with our tax abatement, not only is that for new properties, but for existing properties. And this is another thing that we're trying to work on in our community is not only have new properties, but also upgrade our existing housing market and availability. So we also are 100% 100% tax abatement for 10 years also goes if you do an improvement to your house that improves your house's value by more than 10%, that increment is also tax abated for 10 years. So, if you have a $100,000 house and you put on an extra $20,000 of improvements that not only improve us, but it has to increase the valuation of that house, that extra $20,000 is tax abated for 10 years also. So as an effort to try to make our existing housing better.
I think I'd like to add to that too. We're starting to see some of the local employers that are starting to offer, you could call it a relocation if you want, but they're starting to offer incentives to their people that if you're willing to move to the town that you're working in, maybe there's a $1,000 sign-on bonus. I would give a shout out to Weiler down in Knoxville. They've done a great job with this. And then if you are still there and employee 12 months down the road, you get another percentage gifted to you. So the employers are starting to kind of see that as well as another way to make this more affordable. And I think that futuristically, there could be more opportunities for employers to do that.
All right, we've got a couple of audience questions I'll throw in here. Do you try and create housing opportunities for people or families who maybe don't have a car? Is more walkable or biking or bikeable locations or close to public transit like a priority?
Our low-income housing tax credit or affordable housing tax credit project is pretty much right next door to the hospital, certainly within walking distance of the hospital. It's probably, we are putting in some sidewalks to make it more pedestrian friendly, I guess you would say. We do have a local taxi authority. It's through our NIACOG, our COG is through there. So it's not like a yellow cab or anything like that, but we do have a taxi availability. Walkability, they probably are maybe less than a mile from a grocery store. So yeah, we're trying to they're very close to some of our workforce places or some of our major manufacturers. And so we're trying to make it so that you can get to and from if you don't have vehicles. It's maybe not overly friendly, but we're trying to make it that way.
It's harder in a small town where you don't have a bus system. Knoxville's a good case, but Kading's 400 units that they're building is right next to Walmart. And so some of their basic needs can be met that way. We're just finished a new comprehensive plan, and we're focused on trying to build housing in the downtown area, seniors in particular, so that there is some access, walking access, but it's a hard road to hoe when you don't have a transit system per se.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to that, when we are looking at our communities, we're looking for walkability, we're looking for trail systems, we're looking for amenities. Is it near a school, library? Is it convenient? In most rural Iowa towns, you're a 5 to 10 minute walk from most places anyway. Knoxville's obviously a little bit bigger, but for the most part, it's something that we look at pretty hard. We want it to be in the right spot, and it's important for us as well. But again, it's we're coming in after a lot of this has been developed and doing our assessment after the locations of the lots have been already placed. So.
We have another audience question. This is a big one. Often overlooked in the affordability question is the cost and availability of homeowners insurance. With some insurance companies stopping writing policies in Iowa statewide or increasing rates drastically, how can this be addressed at both the state level and by more weather-resistant construction by builders? I'll give you guys a second to take that one in.
Yeah, that's the problem everybody's facing is the rising cost of insurance, whether it's homeowners insurance or renters insurance or whichever. I don't know that I have a good solution or a help in that area. I don't know, Matt, do you? You look like you're thinking hard.
Yeah, that is a tough one because when we're having all of these natural disasters that are happening across the country, building materials are going to increase. We work very diligently with our vendors and trade partners to control some of those costs as well as we can, buying in bulk, buying large quantity, obviously purchases. But we're not looking to sacrifice the quality of the material or the craftsmanship. So when we're looking at our shingles, we're trying to understand what grade shingle is this? Is this a grade 3? Is this a level 4? What is the wind resistance type rating on this? Obviously, our building codes have standards that we have to meet from fire ratings and those types of things. But the goal is to not let the wind knock the house over. So, of course, we're trying to continue to use quality grade materials and work with trade partners that understand our process with correlation to the overall just quality and craftsmanship. So.
All right, I want to take a shift a little bit back to what we were talking about in terms of community partnerships. What are other ways that communities can be builder friendly and, encourage different types of housing construction in their area?
Part of it has to do with the zoning and subdivision regulations and the way that the municipalities interpret and enforce them. And what I'm finding in a lot of smaller Iowa communities is that the zoning codes in particular often are 30 years old, out of date. And they encourage single family large lot. There sometimes are limitations on your ability to subdivide a townhouse into individual units for sale. Sometimes the interpretation of the code at the municipal level is more restrictive than it should be. And to the extent that you find those things, you need to fix them. Often it's not a case of municipalities wanting to be tough. It's just a matter of old practices lingering on while the world keeps changing. And when you bump into problems with developments, like in Knoxville, Origin and some of the other builders bumped into fatty clay soils, and we had sold them lots at a reduced price, reduced from cost, but not the lowest in the state. And so we agreed to cost share the extra costs of that kind of excavation with them. So those kind of adjustments make a great deal. But in one community, we lost a builder because our building inspector was interpreting the code too harshly, might be the way of saying it.
Which I think it's important to for these communities, keeping up on your comprehensive plans. There's a lot of planning that goes on that sometimes in a smaller community can slip wayside, and you might, as a builder or developer, request the comprehensive plan and only to find out that it's 20 to 30 years old. That's not really that beneficial for us in order to understand the current market. And then taking it a step further and getting a rural housing readiness assessment. The Iowa State Extension Office does a really great job with this, but it's taking a little bit more of a deep dive into the analysis of the specific products of the houses that are needed, which then can arm the city with the zoning and some of those things that Glenn was talking about.
Like you say, Glenn said, things are always changing. And so we, in Charles City at least, and we've had developers that come to us, we've tried to work with them in some areas of rezoning different areas to make them available for what they're proposing. Because like you say, maybe the plan's a little older and it isn't zoned for that today, but it could be rezoned to a different use. And so that's the one thing we've tried to work with, is to um, within reason, work with developers to rezone properties as needed. And sometimes in one instance, we had a developer, particularly with our affordable housing, that wanted to come build a multi-level or 3-level apartment complex right across the street from a single family neighborhood. And so we were going to rezone that to multifamily, and we got quite a lot of pushback from the neighbors in that area because it was going to change the character of their whole neighborhood. And so I understand that, from our standpoint too. And so, we looked at other areas where maybe it would fit into a neighborhood better. But, to say, well, we want to build here, well, maybe that here isn't the best place, but we've tried to work with those developers to find a place where in our community it would be the best place.
Yeah, when it comes to kind of these affordable housing developments, can we kind of talk through the process between, the idea to build kind of comes up to when residents actually move in? How does that process work?
Like I say, with ours, we're working with Commonwealth out of Wisconsin, and they approached us because we were a thriving community and we had those extra points for low-income housing tax credits. They approached us, and we actually had 3 different developers that approached us. So they were the only one that, they all could have followed through with applying for those, but obviously only one can get it per community. So they were the ones that kind of followed through and got the tax credits. Then leading up to that, they had worked with, again, their property was owned by our area development corporation. So they worked with them to acquire the property. We had to do some rezoning. So they worked with us to do that rezoning. Now they're in the construction phase. And so I think they will be, looking for residents in the spring. And so I think that's kind of the process that's happened here, that they saw we had these tax credits, then they came to us and say, how can we make this project happen?
Yeah, and for Origin, as a single family builder, owner occupied homes, throughout the year we're receiving information, we're networking, we're meeting community members, those of which will go to our website, they'll fill out the building in your community form fill. That's kind of the first introduction to, this community is looking for housing. We want to talk to Origin. At that point, we'll start doing a little bit deeper dive. We'll look at the thriving communities. We'll look at the housing needs and the comp plans. We'll get to the point where we've narrowed it down from maybe 10 or 12 communities down to 3 or 4. And then we'll start doing our community visits. We want to see the lots. We want to see if it's in the location we want to be in. And from there, we're setting really more of a community focused goal, partnering with everybody that's involved so that we can create our housing plans, make sure the price points are in line. We get our city approvals, we're moving forward. And then typically around June is when we apply. I think it's early June is the workforce housing tax credit application. So after we've done all the legwork and we've narrowed it down to our communities, we wait until typically August, early September to see if we've received those awards. And then from there, which is where we're at right now, is we're in our due diligence period. So our goal is to go from a June application to either being in the ground early fall or mid fall of that same year, so that those 3 to 5 homes will hit the spring market, be ready to move in. And so typically our turnaround is 4 months, maybe 5, from when we start digging to when somebody can actually move in. It's about a year-long process overall, maybe 10 months. But when you start seeing dirt moved on the lots to move in ready, it's 4 to 5 months.
I think communities also have a role in smaller towns where there hasn't been a lot of housing development. And all of a sudden it's proposed, whether it's land or the buildings like Origin does. There are a lot of naysayers. Oh, we tried that, it didn't work. Are they really going to start doing the subdivision? Will the houses sell? I had in one community, I was building some houses, and a fellow who should have known better was going around telling people that we were building paper houses because we were using manufactured wood siding that had been pre-treated. And so there's a role of community leaders to make sure the facts are out there. And one of the good things that Origin did in Knoxville was this, as soon as they had a house ready to show, they had an open house where they invited people in. They worked with the media. All the councilmen showed up so that they could say, well, I've seen the houses. Have you seen these houses? They're actually really nice houses. And all that was true. But until that word got out, the naysayers were creating some havoc.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Megan, like I say, that was one of the big things we had, is to explain what affordable housing is and who are the people who are going to be, what's the need in our community for this, and explain there is a need in our community for this. The other pushback we got, because both of our projects are rental properties, is from some of our landlords in town that said, well, this is going to change our whole market, and we have all these properties that is it going to affect our ability to rent our properties? And so what we kind of explained to them is that people moving to our community, particularly, this is what we hear from our major employers, they're looking for rentals, but they don't like the rentals that are available, because most of them are 50, 60-year-old 3-bedroom, 2-story houses. That's what's for rent. And if you're a single person moving to town, or maybe a couple moving to town, you don't want a big old house that you either have to fix up or have to do a lot of work on, or whether you're renting or owning, either way. And so we've encouraged our landlords that, maybe they need to work on making their properties more desirable rather than complaining about the competition that's coming to town.
Interesting. Yeah, you all have mentioned kind of the workforce housing tax credits. Beyond just that sort of tax credit opportunity, what role does, the workforce play in terms of where housing is created?
You mentioned Weiler, the hospital system in Knoxville also gives bonuses to some of its senior employees, doctors and technicians and that, if they live in the community, and they can make a serious dent in their mortgage payments. There are various ways that employers can do things, and where they do, it can make a difference. Weiler's program is not a lot of money, but if you're moving to a catering unit in Knoxville because you work at Weiler, it helps pay for the move, and that's a big deal. And with the catering project, 63% of the people who have moved into the first phase moved in from another city. And Weiler was, for example, and Walmart next door were some of the major employers that those people were working at.
Yeah, and we've seen some other options. We've seen some local banks that might offer closing incentives or assistance with closing costs if you're purchasing a home in one of these new developments. So I think there's multiple angles that we can look at it from. Not just, obviously you're going to look at the local employers and you're going to see, how many people they have there, but then branch, outside of that and look at the banks and look at some of those other incentives that can be offered when purchasing the new home.
We've talked a bit about kind of building costs being on the rise. How can we still ensure, that Iowans in various communities are going to be able to, purchase and, rent different types of housing units? What are, kind of other risk mitigation factors in the build process that can be implemented?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the providing these solutions, it's not always going to be one specific model that's going to fix it. It's going to be the rental units. You're going to have your mid-range homes. You're going to have your custom folks that are, maybe have lived in a home for 30 or 40 years. Maybe they're looking to get into something that's newer and maybe getting close to retirement. And that's going to open up those opportunities for someone that, and maybe would look at that on the kind of that housing ladder. So it's a tough one to say that it's not just going to be a one size fits all. And there's got to be variation to everything that we're doing with the framework.
Yeah, I just heard on the radio the other day, and I think this was a nationwide survey, but a substantial number of people have given up on the fact of being a homeowner just because of the cost of it anymore. And I think that's maybe not so much in Iowa. I don't know. Maybe that's why rentals have become, like I say, all of our projects are rentals. That's why rentals have become more popular, because people can't afford to buy the home. But I think, as many incentives as we can give to builders, because it's hard. We have a higher end condominium project that went in, and they're having a hard time. They've invested quite a bit of money into that. These are local people who aren't necessarily developers, but they just thought that they wanted to see that opportunity in our community, and so they went ahead and built 9 condominium units. They haven't sold any of them yet, and so that is a concern, because I think the part of the problem was they had a price point that they were thinking about selling them for. As they built them and the costs kept going up, now their price point is quite a bit higher than what they had thought it was going to be, just because of the cost of building. So I know that's probably a challenge for you guys, Matt, because, like you say, in these places too, they're quality buildings, they're quality amenities in the building. You don't want to build something that's, slipshod and have it be a problem 5 years down the road. So people also want those quality buildings, but the cost of them is becoming more.
Yeah, and part of our challenge is always, we're constantly negotiating with our vendors and our trade partners, and looking at the big picture rather than one project at a time. And so when you're able to do that from a holistic perspective, for the most part, people understand that we're trying to create a roadmap for future success, not just a snapshot from a moment in time.
In very expensive housing markets, lots get smaller and housing units get smaller, and there's a trade-off in size, but that allows the builders and the homeowners or renters to take advantage of quality materials. Because if you undercut the quality of your materials, you're building a house that isn't going to last as long and isn't going to have the same value. It's a real struggle now. It has been for some time, and the round of tariffs that we're facing could make it worse before it gets better.
We do have another audience question here. What potential is there for more mixed-use buildings? For an example, businesses on the first floor and housing on upper levels. Are there limits to where these types of developments can work?
Again, dense urban areas, particularly commercial strips and downtown areas, work best for them. You need a high cost structure to make them work quite often. The struggle now is that so much of our commerce is moving online that we've got a lot of retail vacancies. A lot of the business opportunities, office work is moving online too in a lot of cases. So it's harder to put those packages together. I'm a proponent of having mixed-use neighborhoods where there may be a house or an apartment around the corner, but you can still walk to work and eliminate some of the complications of mixed-use buildings.
Yeah, and this is a great question. I serve on the Planning and Zoning Committee down in the city of Cumming, and it's a small community just outside the metro, about 500 people. But there's a company down there doing some really good things and being very proactive. And their next phase of one of their buildings is actually, I think they call it the live work model. So they have the shop or the business boutique down below and then the apartment up above. And even though that's one building, it's actually going to be separated into 4 lots. And so creativity with that, with your PUD and having planning and zoning and city council that is also willing to take the chance on some creative zoning. I think Adele's got some examples of that. And I think in Manning, when they're fixing up the main street, they've got some opportunities to do kind of that same thing with the live work model. But we are seeing a little bit more of that. And it's just another way to add some housing options. So it's a good question.
Got another audience
I
question
think
here. I'm with a nonprofit and we build workforce homes and have found that the market to sell our homes has slowed down significantly in the past 4 to 5 months. Are others seeing this same change recently?
For me, we're seeing it, but it's a little dependent on the number of employers in that area, the size of the community. There's definitely been a little bit of a slowdown, so yes. But as the Fed does what the Fed does, you're starting to see things kind of start to tick up again. And we've seen a lot more activity in the last 30 days than we probably have in the last 4 or 5 months. So I think there's a change coming. I think it's going to happen here pretty soon because we are starting to see that shift just a little bit.
I was at a meeting the other day with one of our local realtors, and he was talking about how, things have kind of slowed down here in the last probably 6 months or so. And I think it has to do, interest rates maybe have come down a little, but they're still higher than what people are comfortable with, especially when you compare it to the cost of housing. So he thought not as much activity in the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to go back to the previous question, Megan, with the downtown. We had a project that was a complicated project, but it's just finished up here in the last couple of years. And it was retail on the main floor and housing on the upper 2 levels of 37 rental units. And those rental units, once the project was done, they've had a harder time filling the retail down below. But those 37 rental housing units up above were all taken, and within 6 months they had rented all 37 of those, and I think they're still full. If somebody moves out, they have people ready to move in. So in our community, I think people are looking. They like that downtown accessibility to the restaurants, to the grocery store, to the pharmacy, to all those different things. The problem that some of our business owners downtown find is that to get the fire, their fire rating between their first floor and their second floor is costly. To either they have to do a fire rating from one floor to the other as far as a time period that the fire can spread, or they have to sprinkle that upper level, and that becomes a cost factor that a lot of them aren't able to justify without some kind of help somehow. So they have an interest to do upper level housing, but the cost to get it going is sometimes prohibitive.
I'm going to bring the conversation back to these tax incentives, since that is kind of a big part of creating different types of housing. What makes for a successful application for something like the workforce housing tax credit or other state programs?
When I write them, I pay extremely close attention to the objectives of the program and the examples of projects that have succeeded in the past. I also try to talk to someone at IEDA to get a sense of whether they have some new thoughts on where they're going with that program. And then you write the simplest application you possibly can and hope for the best. Yeah,
for me, it's the community focused goals, having that piece, and then the narrative along with that. You're pulling different pieces from different employers, from city council, and being able to get the narrative spelled out very specifically. I think that's a very, it's just a very important piece to explaining the story. And we've seen a lot of success with that and great letters of recommendation from across the board in the communities that we work with. Good support.
Yeah, I guess I don't know so much about for those tax credits because the developers do those, but I know when we applied for our thriving communities, I think the reason we were accepted in the first round was we had shown that, you know, what we had done previously, like Glenn said, you know, what successful projects have you done? What is your goal? What, you know, do you have a vision, I guess, of what you would like your community to be, and showing some of the things you've done, either that we at the city has done or other developers have done that's worked with the city or whatever, to show some that you have some success and you have a vision, both.
Mhm.
How do you all ensure that you have a good partnership between the builder and, you know, the city or community members at large, or in your case, you know, with the builder and developer?
There's kind of a courtship that happens. I don't like to use that word, but that's more or less what it is. You kiss a lot of frogs before you find the right combination. But really, when you're meeting with, if you're a city person or you're meeting with a builder or developer, you're trying to get a sense of who they are, what they're trying to do, how they come to your community, and you look at who your interactions with them, and you check out their references if you like. And if I'm a builder, I do the same thing. Within 10 minutes, I can tell you whether a municipality is going to be helping me or standing in the way. It just is pretty easy to tell. And then after that, you know, if you've chosen right, you solve problems together.
Yeah. Yeah, I would, you know, your courtship, like you said, goes both ways. You know, the city is courting the developer, but the developers also, you know, they have other cities they can go to also. So they're looking at your city to see how you can work together, and just finding that group that can work together. You know, some groups, and whether it's the developer or whether it's the city, it's just not a good fit. But you find that good fit in both of our projects that we have going. We've had a lot of contact both back and forth with with each of those developers to see what do they need, what do we need, and it's just been an ongoing. I think courtship's a good description.
Yeah, and just to kind of echo that, Mayor, the communication piece is very important. Accessibility to the decision makers is very important. So for me, it's a boots on the ground type of approach. It's a handshake, it's a conversation. It's them getting an understanding of who we are and what we're trying to do. And I like to steal this one from Jimmy T over at IDA, but builders and developers have a tendency to act like a glass of spilled milk on the table, right? We're going to go to the path of least resistance. And when we start facing pushback and we start facing the questions and, you know, just some of the things, the narratives that can get spun the wrong way. And a lot of that has to do with just absence of information, right? It can lead to uncertain or incorrect narratives that happen. So we want to feel, like I've said before, that we're all rowing in the same direction, and sometimes that path of least resistance presents itself a little bit quicker in some areas than others. So
We are kind of getting to the end of our time here. I wanted to ask if any of you had any last thoughts about, you know, creating housing in Iowa. If there's anything that we have not touched on yet that you want to make sure our audience gets to hear about.
Well, I see a question about hotel conversions, and I've worked on a couple of projects both in Iowa and in Canada, and if you can take 2 hotel rooms and convert them into a 1-bedroom suite, it works really well. Much better than you might think. I've worked on an old motel in Iowa and about a 1908 hotel in Calgary. It's something to look into. A lot of these old hotels, they're purpose built. They don't have another use. A conversion like this is worth exploring.
Yeah, for me, it's we've seen a variety of housing projects that can work and not work, but when I talk to communities, it's the idea, and Glenn just was mentioning one, thinking differently so we can create differently, because it's not a one size fits all. And then, like I mentioned before, affordability means different things to different people, and really understanding that from a generalized approach, that one is what works over here is not going to work over there. But then from the community, for the community leaders that are on, the ones that have worked with me, I say be patient, be persistent, and keep working through that, because if you have the right builder or developer, they're going to be along for the ride with you and have the best of intentions for your community and your city.
Yeah, the only thing last thing I would say is we've gone to the state housing conference the last few years, and that has proven to be beneficial. Also, number one, you make some contacts with people. I know at the last one we went to, we were set up with 3 different developers in just our city to visit with them as far as what possibilities there could be for them and for us. But you also just going to that conference, you learn a lot of things. You see people like Matt and Origin Homes there, and you can visit with those people and kind of see what the possibilities are. So I think, if you have an opportunity to go to some of those housing conferences, that gives you a lot of information that you can use, whether it's, the next week or the next year.
Thank you to the 3 of you, our panelists, for taking the time to chat with me today. I think, I hope our audience got a lot of this conversation. Thank you to people in the audience for showing up, and thanks to anybody that's watching this recorded session later this week. Yeah, I will let you all get on with the rest of your Thursday, but thanks again for participating.